Lot number 19 is one of my very, very favourite stories of all time. It's called The King, the Dog and the Golden Bowl, and it is a story that has sung to me for as long as I can remember. Along with this lot comes an absolutely exquisite edition of the Arabian Nights, illustrated by Edmond Dulac, whose illustrations from the early part of the 20th century are regarded as the finest illustrations of that treasury ever done.
The King, the Dog, and the Golden Bowl. Once upon a time there lived a merchant called Hassan, who was wealthy, happy, and blessed with good fortune. But one day disaster struck. Laden with treasure from afar, his fleet of ships was captured by pirates. At the same moment, his warehouses, packed floor to ceiling with precious merchandise, were razed to the ground. Unable to face his friends, Hassan sold his remaining belongings and set off in search of his fortune. While he was asleep in a caravanserai, a thief stole his remaining money, and he found himself in an unfamiliar country without a single coin to his name. Unsure of what to do, Hassan took refuge at a mosque, although ashamed of himself for having been reduced to the status of a beggar. Wondering how he was ever to hold his head up again, he asked the mosque keeper for advice. "My brother," said the old man, "go 3 days, march from here, and you will arrive at such and such a place. The king there is both generous and kind. You may be able to put your case before him. He will certainly help in a more substantial way than we can here at the mosque." Fishing out a handful of coins from the poor box, he passed them to the beggar with God's blessing. Sincerely thankful, Hassan set off. The way was arduous, and by the time he reached the walls of the city where the generous king was said to live, Hassan was tired, thirsty, and famished. Staggering through the streets, he saw that the shopkeepers were richly clad, and everyone appeared well-fed, content in body and mind. Warily, Hassan made his way towards the palace, where the mosque keeper had said the generous fed the hungry each night. But when he finally arrived at the magnificent building, Hassan was overcome with shame. He was shoeless and dressed in rags. Fearful of presenting himself in such a state before the monarch, he hid behind a pillar. From that vantage point he surveyed the scene. In the middle of the palace was a concourse of people, young and old, each one of them being given food and money from the hand of the kind-hearted king. From his hiding place, Hassan spied 3 great hounds being brought to a space a few feet away from him. An attendant placed a bowl of the finest meat on the floor, one for each of the hunting dogs. The attendant strode away, leaving the animals to feast. When he was gone, Hassan found his eyes fixed upon the delicious meat on which the hounds were feeding. His mouth drooling, he imagined the taste of the meat. As he watched, the dog nearest to him raised its eyes to his, and, looking at him in an almost human fashion, shoved its jeweled golden bowl towards Hassan with his nose. Starving, the impoverished merchant helped himself to a large, succulent morsel of meat before pushing the bowl back to the hunting dog. But with its paw, the animal again nudged the vessel over to Hassan, apparently coaxing him to eat to his heart's content. Only when the beggar had eaten to bursting did the animal polish off what was left. Once he had licked the bowl clean, he prodded it back towards Hassan with the tip of his nose. The dog was offering him the golden bowl. Taking it in his hands, Hassan hid the precious object under his tattered cloak. Watching the hound seemed to nod his head with approval. Hassan knew full well that, were he to sell the bowl and buy himself new clothes, he would have a chance to rebuild his life. Patting the dog gratefully on the head, he slipped out of the palace where the generous king was still feeding those in need. Next day, Hassan sold the exquisite bowl. Being studded with precious jewels, it brought him in such a good price that he was able to set up in business for himself. By shrewd buying and selling, he soon had enough merchandise to take back to his native country, where his friends greeted him with much celebration and joy. Good luck having returned to Hassan's life, he became a successful trader once again. Before long, he was wealthier than he had ever been. Years passed, but he never forgot the kindness of the dog that gave him the golden bowl. One day, spurred on by gratitude and a sense of duty, Hassan made up his mind to replace the precious object he had been given by the hound. Working with the best craftsmen in the kingdom, he designed a perfect replica. Within a few days, the bowl was ready. Once dressed in flowing robes and in boots of the finest leather, Hassan mounted his finest horse and set off. After many adventures, he reached the ancient city walls that encircled the capital of the generous king. But riding through the imperial gates, he saw the city's houses were wrecked, silent and empty. The shops were rich and contented merchants were despoiled of all their merchandise. All the city's inhabitants were gone. Worst of all, the great palace was wide open to the sky, roofless and ruined, its beautiful pillars crushed along with everything else as if ravished by Mongol hordes. Sorrowfully, Hassan mounted his stallion to ride away. As he tugged the reins, a great hound darted fast from the ruins, followed by two more. And at once Hassan recognized them as the fine hunting dogs that had once feasted from golden bowls and helped a beggar in terrible need. A few minutes passed, then an old man appeared, wearing a rough woolen robe. He clasped the end of a stick in his hand. "Greetings, my son," he said. "What brings you to this desolate place?" Hassan returned the greeting and explained. "Some time ago I came here in rags and was fortunate enough to be given the meat from a bowl by this dog here. When I left, I took the bowl, sold it, and replenished my fortunes. Now I've come to repay the debt and return an exact copy of the bowl." "Those times are gone," said the ancient, "and the vanity and pomp which was once my court has vanished too." Squinting, Hassan saw that he was speaking to none other than the generous king, whom he had seen feeding the poor with his own hand. "Your Majesty," he said, "please take this golden bowl which I have brought." The old king chuckled. "I have no need for anything," he replied, "except that which I have here. My hounds catch game for me one daily meal, and the palace gardener, who has remained with me, continues to grow vegetables for me. Together with the hounds, we manage to enjoy our lives. After my enemies destroyed my town and my people were taken away, I have lived very simply here." But the bowl, the golden bowl," uttered Hassan. "May I not leave it for you, Your Majesty?" "If a dog of mine thought fit to give it away, his bowl," said the king, "it's not for me to take it back. I'm sure that he has no need of it now. Go, return from whence you came. We are sufficiently provided for at the present time." So, bowing low, Hassan mounted his steed and rode away. Looking back, he glimpsed the old king leaning upon his stick, waving a last farewell. A moment later, the old man had disappeared into the ruins, his hounds about him. Riding day and night, Hassan reached his own country as quickly as he could. Deeply moved by the generosity, he set about liquidating his fortune, except for what he required to live a modest existence. Then, calling upon the craftsman who had made the replacement bowl, he commissioned 50 more bowls, each one as splendid as the first. When they were ready, Hassan presented the bowls to his most trusted retainers. Instructing them to take them afar and wide, he gave orders for the bowls to be given to the misfortunate so that they may rebuild their lives as he himself had done. Each of the bowls was inscribed with a story, the tale of the king the Dog and the Golden Bowl.